Nothing in the space implied movement anymore. Corridors did not invite passage. Open areas did not suggest direction. The environment existed without preference. I walked for several minutes and felt no transition. There was no sense of leaving one place and arriving in another. Every location carried the same weight, the same stillness. I realized then that the world no longer distinguished between here and there. It had flattened into a continuous state where position meant nothing. Movement no longer created progress. It only displaced me inside a field that never changed. The space had not removed paths. It had removed the idea that any path led somewhere. And in a place where every point is equivalent, the concept of destination loses all meaning. I tried choosing a direction anyway. I turned left, then right, then back again. Nothing changed. The space did not respond because response implied difference. Every route felt identical. Every turn returned the same state. I wasn't navigating. I was rotating inside sameness. The world had removed orientation itself. Not blocked, not hidden, dissolved. I realized then that decision had become meaningless. Choice requires consequence. Here, nothing followed. The environment did not oppose me. It did not guide me. It simply remained. I could walk forever and never be closer to anything. The space no longer contained arrival. It only contained presence without progress. And in a world where movement produces no outcome, even the act of choosing becomes a gesture. I began to notice that even memory no longer anchored me. I could not tell whether I had already been in a place or not. Every corridor felt both familiar and new. The space offered no markers, no variation, no residue of passage. I walked for minutes, then stopped, unsure if I had moved at all. The environment erased the distinction between past and present. Nothing accumulated, nothing receded. I realized then that this world had removed history, not erased it, neutralized it. There was no before to measure against, no after to approach. Every moment existed in isolation, identical to the one before it. I wasn't forgetting where I had been. The space no longer allowed where to persist. And in a reality that cannot remember, even the idea of having been somewhere loses meaning. I realized that even anticipation had disappeared. I no longer expected anything to happen, not because I had learned patience, but because the space no longer implied possibility. There was no sense of soon, no edge between now and what might come next. The environment existed without tension, without buildup, without release. I stood in a wide chamber and felt nothing approaching. No sound, no shift, no change in air. The world did not prepare itself for events because events were no longer part of its structure. I understood then that this place had removed the future itself, not delayed it, not hidden it, eliminated the condition that made it exist. And in a reality without a future, waiting becomes a gesture towards something that no longer has a form. I began to feel that even urgency had no place here. My body still produced it, but the space did not recognize it. I moved faster. Nothing responded. I slowed down. Nothing changed. The world no longer mirrored internal states. It did not accelerate with fear or pause with doubt. It remained constant. I realized then that emotion itself had lost function. In a place without outcome, intensity becomes noise. The environment had removed the feedback loop between feeling and result. I could panic. I could hope. I could decide. The space would not reflect any of it. It wasn't indifferent. It was complete. And in a reality that no longer reacts, even urgency becomes indistinguishable from rest. I realized that even failure had lost its meaning. To fail requires an intended result. Here, nothing was meant to happen. There was no correct state to miss, no outcome to reach too late. I could not be wrong because the world no longer defined what was right. Every action dissolved into equivalence. Every attempt became neutral. The space had removed evaluation itself. It no longer compared states. It no longer preferred one over another. I understood then that this place had exited judgment, not morally, structurally. It no longer distinguished between success and error. It simply existed, and in a reality without criteria, even the idea of doing something wrong becomes impossible. I began to feel that even identity had no anchor here. I could not tell whether I was changing or remaining the same. The space provided no contrast. No event reflected me back to myself. Without consequence, there was no continuity. I existed moment to moment, without accumulation. I realized then that selfhood requires a world that remembers, a structure that carries you forward. Here, nothing did. The environment did not mirror me. It did not resist me. It did not respond. I wasn't losing myself. There was no mechanism left that could define what myself meant. The space had removed the conditions that made a person persist. And in a reality that no longer remembers, identity becomes something that cannot survive even a single step. I tried holding on to a single thought, just to see if it would last. The moment I focused on it, it dissolved. Not forgotten, unanchored. The space provided no structure for continuity. Each idea existed alone, then vanished without residue. I realized then that this world no longer supported persistence at any level. Not of place, not of action, not of self. Everything appeared and disappeared in isolation. There was no thread to follow, no line to remain on. The environment did not interrupt me. It simply did not carry me forward. I wasn't being erased. I was being reset at every moment. And in a reality that cannot preserve even a thought, existence becomes a series of beginnings that never become anything else. I realized that even hope had no surface to rest on. It rose, then collapsed without touching anything. The space did not offer a horizon. No edge suggested that something else could exist. There was no later to project into. The world had removed the concept of elsewhere. Every point was final, every moment complete. I understood then that escape was not impossible. It was undefined. There was nowhere for it to occur. The environment did not block departure. It did not permit it. It existed in a form where leaving had no reference. I wasn't trapped. There was simply no outside for reality to continue into, and in a place where there is no beyond. Even the idea of getting out becomes a thought the world no longer supports. I stopped searching for a way out when I realized that leaving required a world that could change. Escape implies a transition from one state to another. Here, no state replaced anything. The space did not progress. It did not conclude. It did not open. It simply remained. I understood then that this place had not trapped me. It had removed the condition that made departure possible. There was no after to arrive in, no layer beyond this one. Movement still existed, but it no longer meant going somewhere else. Direction still existed, but it no longer led away. The system did not hold me here. It ended the idea of elsewhere, and in a reality without beyond, staying and leaving become indistinguishable. Existence no longer asks where you are going. It only asks whether going still has meaning.